Dzień dobry Państwu, nazywam się Wojciech Jakóbik i będę miał przyjemność poprowadzić panel o ubóstwie energetycznym na polskiej wsi w kontekście perspektyw rozwoju odnawialnych źródeł energii. Jest to temat ważny, był już poruszany we wcześniejszych dyskusjach, ale tutaj zebraliśmy specjalistów, praktyków, którzy na pograniczu sektora rolnego i energetycznego chcą rozmawiać o ubóstwie energetycznym. Wszyscy czujemy zjawisko ubóstwa energetycznego albo u siebie, albo w naszym otoczeniu. Ono ma specyficzny charakter także na wsi i walka z nim rodzi ciekawe perspektywy rozwoju źródeł odnawialnych, rozwoju magazynów energii, różnych projektów tego typu, które także na Podkarpaciu widać coraz częściej. Są związane z tym różne wyzwania, a zatem usłyszymy na koniec też pewnie poznamy garść rekomendacji, co zrobić, żeby łatwiej było walczyć z ubóstwem energetycznym, na przykład z użyciem źródeł odnawialnych. Pragnę przywitać naszych wspaniałych panelistów. Jest to profesor Sławomir Kalinowski, kierownik Instytutu Rozwoju Wsi i Rolnictwa Polskiej Akademii Nauk.
Dzień dobry. Ale
brawo. Nie całego, ale wydziału specjalnego. Tak. I pani dyrektor też jest z nami. Bardzo dobrze, bo będzie okazja do zadawania pytań, do dyskusji. Na koniec, jeśli nam wystarczy czasu, będzie można. Jest z nami też Jarosław Fabiański, prezes Direct for Energy. Dzień dobry panie prezesie i wielkie brawa dla pana prezesa. Profesor Grzegorz Wisz, prezes Podkarpackie.
Professor Grzegorz Wisz, president of the board of Subcarpathian cluster of renewable energy, Rzeszów University, and also Łukasz Hołubowski, member of the board of PCRB.
I będziemy mówić.
And we'll be talking about what the energy poverty looks like in rural areas, how renewable sources can help fighting it, and perhaps we will get to know some studies, case studies, but we start from theory, from the academia. And Professor Kalinowski, energy poverty can have various faces. What are the faces in rural areas?
No właśnie.
Yes, so in common perception we think that energy poverty is lack of means to heat our flat, but it is a very narrow meaning of energy poverty because we have to think more broadly, more cascade-like. The result of this energy poverty is lack of appropriate means to satisfy energy needs, but we must view it in categories like insufficient satisfying or deprivation of needs, and what's more, insufficient satisfaction of technical needs or those related to equipping households like rotting window frames or humidity in walls and problems with a leaking roof and so on. So we can see that energy poverty is a very broad problem and highly comprehensive because the poverty itself is quite a serious problem. Although over 120 years of studying poverty in Poland and globally has been going on, we still don't know what this poverty is. It's similar with energy poverty because if somebody is asking about the size of energy poverty in Poland, the answer may be 2% and it may be 40%. Why? Because we don't have one definition of poverty. If we assume the simplest definition of poverty, low income, high costs, then the poverty is at the level of about 10%. If, however, we assume the applied double mediana used in the EU, so mediana of spendings on energy, then it drops down to below 5%. It may seem very good compared to EU. Southern countries have much worse results. But if we look at other indicators related to such consensual poverty, that means a feeling of deprivation in energy needs, we may even be talking of 40% people under the threat of poverty. What do those people miss? Deprivation. It means deprivation of the possibility to satisfy the comfort, thermal comfort at home. I intentionally say thermal comfort, not heat, because we always think about heat, but nothing more wrong. If somebody has 19 degrees at home, they don't have the heat. It must be subjective feeling of lack of discomfort, because we cannot say upfront, you or me, 19 degrees is a sufficient temperature, because everybody feels this poverty differently. And what's more, problem is appropriately cooling flats in summer period, and we will be facing this problem in the nearest time in much greater degree than today. It is the south of Europe. All south of Europe has a problem of properly cooling the flats. So heat comfort and maintaining it is extremely important in our situation. Yes, and what the situation of cities is different from that with the situation of rural areas. Higher transfer costs of heat, lower than in towns, thermal efficiency of flats. It is very thermal energy efficiency. It is a very important problem. So poorly insulated buildings, insufficient thermal insulation of the buildings. And this is a problem which first of all, rural areas are struggling with. So even if somebody invests in sources of energy or renewable heats, the energy is escaping through inappropriate thermal insulation of the buildings. And what's more, we are dealing with several other problems, but I think about this we will still hear, because if we think of rural areas, I'm looking at my boss and my colleagues, we must not be talking of one village. If we have a village near a big city, energy problems or energy efficiency of buildings are completely different problems. That village, in our institute, we say it's gentrified. That means it is strongly getting similar to towns. And these problems are very similar to those in towns. But the further we go out to peripheral villages, the problems related to energy poverty are much greater. Much greater problems to satisfy appropriate temperature or heat needs. So here near Rzeszów, the well-being is radiating from the town. Yes, and this is yet another problem, because not only we have an axis related the country, peripheral village, we also have things related to various locations in Poland. Problems with satisfying these problems will differ. So energy poverty actually exists in Polish rural areas. So let's look how to fight that, what tools are given available by entities like those gathered in our panel. Let me start from Mr. Fabiański, president whose company Direct for Energy is dealing with various solutions which can help. So yes, what Professor mentioned earlier, depending on how we calculate, but let's say about 66% of those who are energy poor are inhabitants of villages, and it results from what Professor said, what situation looks like about transfer and density, but also a very important thing, education. So educating people who have these needs here so that they energy-wise independent somehow. They are unfortunately being educated by not quite fully professional experts who see their own interests, their business in something, and not quite fully they want to help those people. We had a program named Clean Air, which was closed overnight in November, and quite rightly. Now it is returning since April, but definitely not on the same rules, because in such pathology it was made. Generally, it did not absolutely fulfill what it should have been. fulfilling, because the program was aimed at especially to provide especially the poorest people with thermal modernization, to exchange heat source and to become energy independent somehow. Energy storage was not in that, because they are in my mój prąd, my electric current 6.0, but really this program wisely managed and educating people and selecting companies for cooperation, those companies who really will take care of this thermal modernization in the right way.
Super, świetnym pomysłem.
It is really a superb, great idea, and giving access through these subsidies, giving access to people who cannot afford this. But if we have a situation where
Najubożsi dostają
the poorest get 136,000 subsidy, out of which the company providing all these services, all their costs are 36,000, and 100,000 is what they earn, their profit, so it will not be working. So we are dealing with various pathologies in the system. Yes, for example, something would cost 5,000 in purchase, but it is sold at 50,000. It cannot be like this. And what's more, about 80% heat pumps mounted in our country should not be mounted in our country, because they do not fulfill our standards climate-wise, because they should be mounted in countries where minimum temperature at night drops not lower than +5 degrees centigrade. And we have negative temperatures. With negative temperature, this heat pump is consuming such a vast amount of energy, and then we have bills of fear, yes, and it goes to the beneficiary who is looking at the bill, and he says, no, I will not switch it on. I must take a loan to pay my electricity bill for 5 years. And at this conference for many years here in Jasionka and Rzeszów, we keep convincing people to go for energy transformation. So how to save this idea with so many pathologies? How should this education you mentioned, Mr. President, and who should be doing it? Well, I think that first of all, here we should start from the very top, and we have a Ministry of Climate,
powinno zweryfikować oczywiście swoimi
who should, of course, verify through local governmental units who is doing it, what parameters should it have, and for whom it should be devoted, because then it will make a logical sense. Will have grounding, and it will work, because, as the professor said, mounting a heat pump in a building which is not heat insulated is simply greatly ungrounded, because it will mean gigantic power bills.
Zanim program Czyste Powietrze wszedł,
well, I have checked it before, clean air program, so thermal modernization of a building from A to Z did cost, it was not long ago, 130 zlotys per square meter. Today it costs 300, 350. Materials got cheaper. So, where from does it come? Is it margin? Yes, it is simply margin. Yes, Professor, briefly. Well, it is, if there is a subsidy, of course, these costs, margins, overburdens, and potential profit at consecutive stages, heating, thermodynamization, and so on, will be growing. May I only, about what was mentioned by you about this awareness or education, based on our studies which we carried out recently at Mazowiecki region, results that if we ask questions related to awareness ecological or environmental awareness or the possibility burning whatever we like in stoves, it appears that 30% of rural area inhabitants believe it's nothing wrong that we burn any available fuel. It's a vision of independence, yes, but it is also related to insufficient amount of funds they have to buy appropriate fuel, which could be safer for environment. Sorry, poking in. Thank you for the side comment. And Mr. Łukasz Hołubowski, I would touch on one thing here, subsidy. We start thinking only and solely about investment from the perspective whether subsidy is there or not. Nobody asks what for. Do we need this subsidy? How does it influence the price? If, for example, photovoltaic panels cost X. With subsidy, it will cost X plus 60. If we talk of heat pumps, the same is happening. I have been in biogas market. I'm building biogas plants, and I can build a biogas plant below 10 million without any subsidy. And I know examples of biogas plants which were built at the cost of 16, 19 million with subsidy. Half a mega, 1 mega, slightly more expensive. And what does it result from? Margin? Yes, there is margin. We have a few companies in the market, in biogas market, who are natural market leaders, and there is price collusion regarding materials and labor. In biogas market, we have a closed circuit. Like everybody went for photovoltaics, and they were renting thousands of hectares of land for panels. Few of them were established because they were banks of land. Then investors went for solutions without, so we can see trading between funds with connection terms. And the same is happening with biogas plants. All of a sudden, everybody woke up. The first biogas plant built in 2005 without any subsidies, without any regulations, by a good company, still active. The company still has 5 or 6 other biogas plants. It's working, and I don't think that they would ever think of a subsidy. Our biogas plants, which we have been built without any subsidy. And return on these investments is not after 10, 12 years, like with subsidy, but after maximum 5 years. So fighting energy poverty should not only be based on permanent subsidizing. I'm not against having the subsidy, and for the subsidy to make any acceleration or earlier return on investment. Because this investment has to be funded somehow. Investment costs spread over time. These are the indicators every investor is looking at usually. But when we are talking, I recently analyzed the market of small biogas plants. So those small 50 size, small 50 size and cost generating 1 megawatt out of such a small 50 unit. So after 10 years, such 50W biogas plant must be practically replaced by a new unit. The very cost of generating energy from this unit 50 is highest cost. We do not include cost of maintenance in it, and labor of people. We are not with every biogas plant. Everybody say how fantastic it is because you don't have to do anything there. Ladies and gentlemen, for one biogas plant, I have 4 jobs, highly paid people, highly paid workers who do not get minimum or even average salary. That's twice national salary, because these are people who have to have technical skills to operate the biogas plants. These are people who have to be able to report every quarter. We have to be reporting to 5 institutions, a couple hundred pages, and every quarter the same work comes. So one job only and solely for reporting purposes. So I will not be complaining about it. It still pays, and it's still is doable, but you have to approach it in a correct way and start from education. And this education is done by what has been mentioned here, by companies who travel and shout how it all has been fantastically made. Let me give you an example of two largest cheaters in biogas market, Mr. Michalak and Professor Dach, who travel and say how biogas plants work with them. But the biogas plant in Przybrod never worked. It was never synchronized with the grid. It never worked. I actually did due diligence for this plant to purchase it, but unfortunately nothing more could be obtained. Is it acquisition like we had? Yes, we had telephone calls. Yes, centers were established to phone farmers and to talk them into, yes, we will build you a biogas plant, but you have to take full responsibility for everything, for subsidies, something. It will never be made, or it will be made and create a greater problem for the farmer than it is. So if we need to educate, when you have the microphone in hand, what will you tell the farmers if they get a telephone call, if somebody is offering the biogas plant? Let them ask how the biogas plant is to work later on, because development itself is the smallest problem. It is painful, but it is doable. But nobody will tell the farmer that this biogas plant is a small refinery which is restricted with all safety threats of gas explosion. So it is the highest level of security which has to be maintained. And besides that, these are physical-chemical processes going on inside one has to take care of, and which needs constant monitoring. What is going on there and how it is working. Once you take care of all that, we are earning money. Otherwise, unfortunately, we still have losses. And this is an important signal. And what a signal will come from Subcarpathian cluster of renewable energy. We will hear from Professor Grzegorz and how to fight this. We hear about education, that there are various challenges. What you, Professor, can tell based on your experience? I agree with all statements uttered so far, although slightly controversial for me is a statement about energy poverty of rural areas, because rural areas are very rich about access to energy sources we may be making use of. But what has been said, lack of awareness, lack of appropriate organization, lack of a system of support reduces our possibility to efficiently utilize these resources. And this education, I guess, is actually the key factor which has very great potential regarding development and development of a degree of utilization of energy sources, especially renewable energy sources, because we have the greatest access to it in rural areas, whereas lack of awareness is a very serious barrier. I would also like to refer to what has been said about funds, because they have their positive and negative aspects. And as I fully agree that the program Clean Air in its final phase, when companies started exploiting it very intensely, was something it's very good that it has been blocked, because it introduced a lot of pathologies, many negative solutions, a lot of practical applications emerged, which did a lot of harm to people. And we know that unsatisfied customer will pass on information to at least 10 others. And now, fighting this negative information which is already in operation, which has been said, it was the example of heat pumps installed in buildings which had not been thermo-modernized beforehand, where we had the old heating system, a low temperature heat or air pump, which is easiest in implementation. The company completes this installation in one day, and the client remains with it for several years. And once we look at various social media, then clients share their experience, and we now not only have to
odczarować tą złą
well,
te złe doświadczenia.
magic this experience, and we must show anew that it makes sense, it is needed, and is doable. And today we should be supporting. As I said, funds have both benefits and negative aspects. So not supporting mass photovoltaics on every building. We have a lot of those, but we have to support those solutions which are in short supply. And what is missing? We miss integration of energy sources which are cooperating next to each other today. Like my predecessor mentioned, the biogas plant, which is operating in a system. But if it was working together with a wind turbine and photovoltaic panels, then this biogas plant is something what we do miss. That means it is a stabilizer. And this is happening in rural areas. And in the village, we have a lot of biomass material which is generated in closed circuit with the use of solar energy and water. In this process, CO2 is actually bound and captured, and we are producing something what is a highly efficient source of energy. We can be storing this energy in a highly effective way in biomass, and this biomass in a transition period of transformation which we are dealing with now, we can be used for stabilizing sources. We do not have our own coal. We do not have nuclear energy yet, and I don't know when we will have, at least 10 years in my estimation. And this atom, it will be a small percentage when it is, and we should be balancing it at local level. So moving on to substantial suggestions, as we have in Mój Prąd, my electricity, obligation to have energy storage to support self-consumption. So sources like biomass should put stakes at such systems to integrate it upfront. Well, we are talking here all the time about solutions for an individual farm. And I'm talking about creating a bit broader system. That means either energy cooperatives or energy clusters in which we can estimate local resources, local needs, and carry out sensible policy and balance this production at local level. Yes?
Każdy rolnik chciałby mieć swoją.
I will agree here because every farmer would like to have own biogas plant. Yes, I'm glad that every farmer would like to have it of their own and operate it on their own. But like a farmer is buying a tractor for 100 hectares, paying 3 million zlotys, which is standing, and it is a component which should be used around the clock to generate return. And like the biogas plant, it should be operating in a municipality or the whole village in order to stabilize energy from all unstable sources which we have on the roofs. Very seldom there are windmills. Those windmills which are in Mój Prąd 10-0, what kind of windmills they will be, what they will be doing. It's a fine thing that we are adding those small batteries working in the system, but let's keep in mind that all batteries which we are buying are not batteries produced in Europe. They obey certain assumptions of the inverter, and that inverter is not quite fully programmed so as to work in Polish market. That means every inverter has about 12 instructions for operation. Those instructions for operation are written by a Chinese producer, because we are actually talking of Chinese. 95% inverters come from Chinese producers, and Chinese producer does not notice problems of Polish power sector. In PCRB, we are in discussion with a large Chinese producer. regarding preparation of inverters, which will be cooperating with and will be really utilizing what we call self-consumption. It is something very important and significant. So before taking up investment project, we should know about it. But unfortunately, nobody told us because everybody said, "Oh, I have subsidy, so I will establish an energy storage facility." I have a facility at home. You know what I did? I used car floor. It has 6 kW. It cost me 20,000 zlotys. I did it myself. What is return? Full cost. When will you have the return? It has already produced return on the investment. No. On purchase, I had return because looking at the fact that I will not pay for heating from the heat pump I have, photovoltaics, which is generating electricity, so my bills dropped in March down to 0, or even the power plant has to pay me. So we are talking of this type of things, and I have quite a large house, so I need quite a lot of energy. Mr. Fabiański wanted to join in. Yes, so here what Professor said, yes, of course, and you, sir. So I agree with this. So biogas plant for every farmer is absolutely economically not grounded and based on the example you mentioned, but it looks nice. Yes, something big, 3 million cost, it is a nice thing. So we generally as Poles have something like this. We would like to have it of our own, so the will to possess. Mine is mine, period. But yes, really, those clusters and energy cooperatives, it is the future, which will allow to optimize it so that we utilize it and that the costs are possibly lowest. So somehow the cost of energy will not be dropping with us. Do not let us be misled, because quite a great concentration goes at what cost the active energy will be provided to us. But very few people pay attention at cost of distribution. Distribution costs in case of clients on G tariffs went up by 100% over 5 years or 6 years, but in C tariffs, so entrepreneurs and farmers running their business, they went up threefold, and many other elements, passive energy and power fee, these are costs which went up drastically, and they are not mentioned. This is not being shown. We are talking here whether it's going to be 0.5, 0.4 zlotys or 0.65 zlotys, but what about for active energy? But what about distribution? We have to find solution which will allow us to obtain this energy in such synergy that we do not bear the distribution costs, because what we give back to the grid, of course, they will pay us, but without distribution costs. This is only payment for active energy. Every producer of green energy bears costs, I don't know why, for cost of green energy. So here again we have aberration. We live in some Bantustan that power companies impose. They produce black energy, so on us they transfer the cost of greening our green energy. Yes, you touched on a very significant problem regarding clusters and energy cooperatives, which would group inhabitants of villages and farmers, other groups, and would encourage them to create larger groups which could satisfy energy needs of those communities. Now, an interesting question. How to encourage? Look, in 1990, the last agricultural cooperative was liquidated, and we still have historical memory being negative against creating cooperatives and clusters. After so many years, we keep talking of it, how to encourage people to create such clusters and cooperatives. And if those clusters are established, so what you said, cost of generation of energy goes down considerably. Cost of gathering this energy and storage drops down. And what's more, a concept may appear that rural areas will be providers of energy for the cities. So they may be additionally earning on this energy, so create additional segment of earning for often ineffective agricultural farms or inhabitants of villages. And yes, and here yet another problem arises which we have to refer to. We have inefficient transfer grid. For so many years we get huge funds on paper from the EU for improving the transfer grid. I think it is new till 76 billion zlotys, if I calculated correctly, and we still keep saying that the transfer grids are ineffective and they are blocking the possibility of transfer somewhere. It is interesting that for so many years we did not manage to appropriately adapt those grids to better. Well, Mr. President, then Professor, we do not have funds.
Tam giną po drodze.
70, ale mamy.
In spite of these 70 million, but we have the power fee, which has been in place for 5 years, collecting vast money, and the money is transferred depending on needs from here to there. But we have something like direct line. It got in last year, and it has been in place for a few months, and direct line, which comes from photovoltaic farm to a plant or factory. And because there is no transfer through OSD network, you have to pay actually a penalty in inverted commas that it is paid directly. It was to be 30%, but it appears to be almost 50%. So it is a bonus for innovativeness. Yes, a bonus for innovativeness. It will be difficult. Well, still worse, that transfer grids, Professor mentioned it earlier, that transfer grids, when you were sending energy from renewables, they were charging you with extra fee. Additionally, this was a paradox. Now the floor to Professor. We are finishing to complain. It will be positive, and then questions from the audience. So let me complain a little bit, because we are in the course of complaining, and I agree with what has been said. But let us try to understand the other side. That means operator of distribution grid, producers of energy, which we are using today. They actually had big losses because those who have system on the building are not paying for energy, and their balance is not matching. So they need to improve the balance. So therefore, they introduce various moves to improve their own balance. And therefore, it is a certain element which is slightly blocking the system and blocking the innovations.
O czym mówimy, bo pewnie zgodziliśmy się już.
And what we are talking about, because I guess we agree that energy cooperatives are the element which could sanitize the situation, because such a smaller entity improves energy security, but it also improves the capacity for self-balancing. We do not need to transfer the energy from wind farm on the Baltic Sea to Ustrzyki Górne in this region and lose 30%. Somebody will have to pay for it on the way because so much energy will be lost, but we will be able to work on our own, and those who will be in the village can be involved in generation processes and improve the situation of the village and reduce the energy poverty. And in long-time perspective, the state should also be after this, because if we spend less funds on energy, electrical energy, on transfer, we will be able to involve these funds in other places and improve quality of life in other areas. So for the economy, it will also be successively improving competitiveness of the economy. We have to be aware that what the EU is doing and the Green Deal, which we may like, we may not like, but in this or other addition for the EU. There is no other path, and the EU doesn't have deposits of oil nor gas. We do not have other resources. However, the renewable energy can be benefited from at free will. And now positive part of the panel, and then questions from the audience, I promise. So let's stay with Professor and in my direction with case studies, examples of successful projects of this type which help solving problems we are discussing in the panel, so that our audience actually gets incentives before they start asking us difficult questions. Will it be a good example? I don't know, but we once made an attempt in 2016 in the law of renewable energy sources. A stipulation appeared about the possibility to form energy clusters. We have prepared a booklet, and I think this is a good example. It was titled Energy Management in Local Government Units, and it was an elaboration based on ISO 50001 standard, European standard, actually treating about energy management, pointing at territorial management units as those entities which should be animators of such clusters, such cooperatives or communities, because municipalities within own tasks have the obligation to take care of energy security.
Na tym się jak gdyby ta nasza dobra praktyka skończyła.
However, here our good practices ended because we tried to convince local authorities to finalize one case, a case which will point at technology and which will be a good example to follow. And first of all, it will teach us how to do it in practice. There was a lot of enthusiasm. We worked for half a year. Then we started working with a specific local government. There was a subsidy after 3 years. There was already awareness in that municipality where it was to be implemented high enough that a statement was said, yes, you are doing well. But in the meantime, there were elections and authorities got changed and this ended. So this is how it ended. And today, I know a few examples of cooperatives or clusters which were successful, effectively implementing the system, because we have a lot of barriers, but we do not have a system of incentives. In spite of having these things described in guidelines, we do not have appropriate incentives which would allow us to do this. And what's more, we do not have appropriate technologies which would allow us to integrate all these sources, digital solutions. So on the one hand, it is a social problem, lack of awareness, often also a lack of trust with this cooperation, because a few entities have to come to agreement which will trust each other and will enter this interaction, and not quite fully. It will be so that it will identically pay for everybody. It may happen that some will actually find it more, some less profitable, and this awareness, it's very difficult to build those partnerships, and when we build this partnership, we lack technology very strongly, and we have some recommendations about clusters and what will be advised by Mr. President Fabiański as a positive example. For me, a positive example, which I believe is working very well, is currently the Mój Prąd, My Electric Current 6.0, where apart from photovoltaics, we are obliged to also install an energy storage facility. So thanks to this, firstly, we are benefiting from this energy in the evenings, energy which was generated by the system during the day. Secondly, we do not make destabilization of the operational system, distribution system, because this, in a way, was a very big challenge, and therefore a settlement was changed. So operator of the system is not storing it, but they are paying us for energy which we supply to the grid. So I am of good hope that this program, Clean Air, when it returns in new shape, it will be really a supportive program. Because as we discuss it, in supporting, in subsidy, there is nothing bad, but it must be done as it should be done. So that really, he who needs thermomodernization, let them have thermomodernization. He who may have a heat pump and pump will not ruin them in electricity bills, great, let them have it, but let it be market quality and adapted to our conditions, to our environment, our climate. So that's one thing. Another thing, we as Direct for Energy, but also our partner with whom we want to be doing a lot of things around the power, apart from selling energy itself, we want also to be educating, to educate people, not based on happening rules, but based on what to pay attention at, what to be driven by in selection, in choice, out of solutions. And of course, it would be fantastic if here from Minister of Climate, our rulers, there were such people, specialists in municipalities, not those who would say, take company A, B, or C, but simply this solution is good or it is not good, let's check it, let's see, let's educate ourselves, because, of course, internet, if we key in whatever, you know, you get a million of various things. Some people talk sense and in line with the truth. Others talk nonsense, and others advertise themselves. So it actually went astray. So we need an authority of some institution. Yes, institution is always an authority, because people think, okay, if I go to my municipality office or to some agency of restructurization, modernization of agriculture, there I have specialists who will help me to make the right decision. And here I do encourage very strongly people to go for this education, so that we do not walk blindly because somebody said, for you it will be fantastic, wonderful, and a few months down the road it appears to be a utopia, and not only it is a utopia, but it literally can drown us regarding electricity bills. Well, Łukasz, let me give you an example of a large company, agricultural company, who wanted to build a 50 kW biogas plant, because somebody came and said that this would be most profitable for them. It will be a positive example. Yes, a very positive example. We got to that entrepreneur as a company. We were invited to give our opinion, and we started talking what the entrepreneur is producing, what do they need the biogas plant for. At the end of the day, it appeared that that entrepreneur made assumption that there was some subsidy available, and there was a seller who talked him into buying a 50 unit. Everything was matching. Only one thing was not: how he wanted to operate and his imagination on how to operate. I'm not against those 50 units, but I'm afraid that there are sellers who hear that there is a subsidy, so it's easy to sell. After some talk, a very large farm, which could have 1 mega biogas plant, but it came to the point that they don't have money and where to take the money from, because the subsidy will not be sufficient, especially that 1 mega unit costs 14-15 million. So somebody must put forward the money, although we have 65% subsidy. So you have to apply for this subsidy. Investment is put off further 2 years forward. We did full audit. We showed them sources of funding, and we showed them that they didn't need to use any subsidy to build it. They could build it in model of external funding, for example, by our company, because we as a company are also an investor. We are investing from private equity into such things, and we cover 100% of financial and operational risk for the first years of operation of the biogas plant, and then gradually we hand over such a biogas plant to such an agricultural producer. So there is an example that it is possible. You can even get support in the foyer. You can talk to Mr. President and you, Professor. Well, when you were talking, gentlemen, I was browsing through all initiatives within the context Smart Village, among others related to recuperation of heating systems in a sports hall in a small place named Renewable or Valley of Good mentioned earlier, and biogas plant, which is an element improving efficiency, energy efficiency of that company. But if I were to specify one which is of key importance, I think I would specify that Dolina Dobra, Valley of the Good. I was looking around if Grzegorz is present in the audience, but I don't see him. So if I am actually talking incorrectly, he will not correct me. Dolina Dobra, which in various stages of production, I guess you know that company, at various stages of production, they use this efficiency, not only economic, but also energy efficiency related to processing own waste, own bio-elements or bio-components which can be utilized in this biogas plant. But what strikes me, it's a foreign example from Jutland, from Denmark, a small town. I will not utter the name but almost 90% energy comes from a biogas plant, which is made by a cooperative, so energy cooperative created by citizens. Is it possible? Yes, it is. And earlier we talked for a moment before the panel that if in other countries certain solutions, certain know-how work, so I think in Poland it would be easy to translate certain elements into our reality. Of course, taking into account all regional conditions and the possibilities. One has to realize this perfectly well. Of course, yes. And as I promised, there is a chance for one or two questions from the audience. One was actually raised at the very beginning. Here is another participant. I will come holding the microphone. Don't worry. Please introduce yourself. Adrian Pacina. First thing, we have low trust, social trust. Therefore, these problems with cooperatives and explanation. We in Ustrzyki Dolne, we have wind farms. No, energy is, we have it from Solina, but energy is in the north. But transfer grids are missing. So in Poland, they are located in the south in Poland. The question is whether or not to leave the elderly people. Well, it's not even not to give them subsidies, but rather to channel it somehow, because naturally those villages are getting older and the problem will not exist in 10, 15 years time. So if they have coal, 15 years from now, there will not be the problem. Simply those people will die out who are using it, brutally speaking. So do we have an idea to shift implementing certain ideas on the given territories? And addressing Professor Sławomir, what about regionalization of these problems? Because in some regions there is greater problem with energy poverty and in others smaller. So thank you. So shifting the support through people aging and regionalization. So maybe the first question first. So let me start a little bit to the first question. I think not. This is, I guess, Adrian intentionally put it sharp. We must not leave certain things until they get solved in 4 or 5 years or 10 years. We have to provide for them, giving them some minimum, not even existential, but social minimum, or satisfying their needs to the minimum. We cannot leave them then. If average age is 70 years, Poland is among most aging countries. The problem will be solved. No, we cannot leave it. And the second is regionalization of poverty. Like everything, we have axis of energy poverty. And as I said, it is axis town, village, and another peripheral village and village near big towns, but also access related. I can see Łukasz in monitoring of development of rural areas, access related to post-agricultural cooperatives or diagonal going across Poland related to social, socio-economical development of Poland. Energy poverty, it is highest. If you look Podkarpackie, Lublin area, Świętokrzyski region, so any of the panelists, two questions, one about aging, the other one about regionalization. Yes, I would like to say I am actually positively, with positive attitude for everybody to have access to it, absolutely. And I think that, of course, what is very important, education, because in our society, people are convinced that if a person is elderly, being 70 or 75 years of age, yes, not that they do not have needs, but it's very easy to manipulate such a person. And here, often, the situation is that those people get advice from their children or grandchildren. It is quite right, because they are more educated in certain areas. But what I mentioned, to have this access to education from professionals who know it.
Wbrew pozorom rzeczywiście są może gdzieś...
Polish village, well, there are villages with average age being relatively high, and 60, 70-year-olds live there. But I noticed that quite many young people go to the village around big cities more, but even in remote areas, say 30, 40 kilometers, communication is no problem. Everybody have cars, so they can get to the place in 30, 40 minutes. And if, of course, that house is somewhere there and it is modernized, then even if the house is sold, obviously its value will be higher. So I would not leave the coal here. Still, the possibility, let's benefit maybe not using a heat pump, but the stove fueled by pellet or wood, but it's cheaper. But let's follow the spirit of time. Well, we only have 4 minutes available, and another question. So there are two levels of education. Yes, formal education, but I can see Grażyna and Ireneusz here. So through local leaders, it is an informal education and encouraging people to go for a change or higher efficiency, energy efficiency. It's an important opinion. Well, please introduce yourself and quickly ask a question. Jarosław, Podkarpackie region. Mr. Łukasz said that the cost of building half a megawatt biogas plant is 10 million up to 15 million maximum. Congratulations, 10 million is a very low cost. Energy for village program of subsidizing small biogas plants. For this half a megawatt, you have to build 10 50 kilowatt ones, which will cost within the range of 30 million zlotys. And the question, isn't it wasting public money? Because we are charming farmers, how fine it will be. I am a strong supporter of biogas plants. We are using a biogas plant, but two conditions, according to me. Biogas plants should be established in farms. They should be part of a farm, especially farms with animal production, one thing, and two, adapted to the size of the farm. Thank you. Specific question and specific person. I agree. 30 million or 35 million the 10 small biogas plants, it's a waste of subsidy because nobody is later explaining to the farmer that whether it is a small or big biogas plant, it requires the same amount of work, the same servicing, and the same amount of maintenance. This is not mentioned. No, people easily say, take money, spend money, but what is happening with it? Unfortunately, not known. But one mistake on biogas plant will cost the cost of investment, because biogas plant may get cemented, so tanks will be for replacement. Thousands of things may happen. One biogas plant got burnt recently.
Bardzo się opłacało wziąć
Yes, it did pay to take subsidy, but I don't know.
Wracając
And
do
back to
tego, co pan powiedział.
what you have said.
Tak.
Yes, biogas plants. Let us locate them either next to farms or in the farms. Location for sure is important to avoid locating it in the center of the village, but on the outskirts rather, and to avoid.
Nie przeszkadza to miastowi,
It is no problem for city dwellers because the smell from a farm producing animals is bigger than from a biogas plant, because in biogas plant everything is closed in chambers because the fermentation does not smell. And it's a beautiful conclusion from our panel, and professor has not been taken care of. So maybe regarding this biogas plant, small biogas plants, what you mentioned, very significant is the thing of security, of safety. Such a biogas plant is quite a complex and complicated system, and it requires constant monitoring, constant supervision, and with smaller units, those unit costs will be relatively high, and that will bear space to reduce the costs, and that will be translated into safety and on how the system will be working. And here we are dealing with gas, quite a lot of gas, and safety first. Yes, neglecting the question of safety may lead to unwanted tragedies. We would not like to have it, and we heard a bunch of good advice from excellent experts. Big hand for our panelists. Thank you very much.